Hello, everybody. My name is Blake Ryder, and I'm the Director of Hospitality Research here at Lighthouse. Welcome to another data story. So really quick 30 seconds on who we are. We are Lighthouse. We are the leading commercial platform for the travel and hospitality industry. Over 65,000 hotels use our products across 185 countries. Here are our awards: 2024 Hotel Tech Awards, #1 Rate Shopping and Market Intelligence, #1 Best Parity Management Software, #1 Best Business Intelligence Software, Hoteliers' Choice Awards, all that good stuff. Okay, let us get to the data. But first, before we get to the data, we got to talk. Here's a little disclaimer, because we all know what we're talking about today. It is the impact of the DNC and the RNC on their respective lodging markets. But to be abundantly clear, nothing I say, nor any of the data I display and analyze, should be construed as a political statement, nor should it be interpreted as Lighthouse taking a stance on any political issues or political parties. If anything I say or any data points that I display come across as though I'm making a politically charged statement, this is entirely unintentional. My job here is this: to take our data and cut it in some unique ways and present it to you, the viewership, in an interesting and hopefully entertaining fashion. All right, that being said, let's get on to the good stuff. Here are some quick facts, okay? The Republican National Convention was held in Milwaukee 4 nights, July 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. All the stats, unless I indicate otherwise, will be for those 4 nights. DNC in Chicago, August 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Same deal here. All the stats will be for those 4 nights in aggregate, okay? Anytime I talk about the same time last year, we are doing a day-to-day comparison. So what that means is I'm not comparing July 15th to July 15th of 2023. I will be comparing July 15th to the equivalent Monday of 2023, which is July 17th, okay? So that is how we are going to be looking at it from a same time last year perspective. I'm also going to be showing you citywide data for these cities, for these dates. These are diverse cities with a lot of different demand across a lot of different functions and uses. So not every single booked hotel room or short-term rental unit, for that matter, will be for the conventions. The same way not every room booked in Paris during the Olympics is for the Olympics. But the important thing to realize is that even if you are in these cities during the conventions and you weren't there for the conventions, the prices you're paying, the numbers that you are seeing online when you're booking, are going to be influenced by the presence of the conventions. Now, according to the Democratic National Convention, they estimated roughly 50,000 visitors to the convention. And the Washington Times reported the same 50,000 attendee number for the RNC. So we are more or less talking about a similar influx of visitors to these cities, albeit much smaller city in the case of the RNC in Milwaukee, and a much larger city in the DNC with Chicago. Visit Milwaukee, they report 6,200 downtown rooms in downtown Milwaukee, and about 25,000 in the greater Milwaukee area. And on the flip side, choose Chicago, they report 46,000 rooms in just Chicago's central business district alone. So we're talking about 2 very different sized cities, okay? And one last thing to note before we get into the data, and that's as it relates to the hotel pricing data. Now, the pricing data is actually bookable prices that we are seeing online. That is what we're going to be talking about. Now, this is obviously a political convention, so your per diem travel is definitely going to be something that is going to be a factor in travel to these markets. However, our pricing data is pricing that is bookable online, OTAs, major hotel websites, and things of that ilk. So government per diem rates will not be bookable via those platforms. So that's just want to get that out of the way. And that being said, let's get to the numbers. So we'll start with hotels first and then eventually get to short-term rentals. Now, it's important to note that this is not ADR. This is pricing data. This basically means an average of the lowest bookable hotel rates. These are actual bookable prices for hotels in Lighthouse's data set for the time period in question. And that is 10 days ahead of the stay dates. It's a metric that we in Lighthouse refer to as actualized lowest price. So these numbers represent the average of all 4 days of the convention. And what we see here is the actualized lowest price for the RNC in Milwaukee, $1 relative to $270 for the DNC. So we are in a situation where the RNC has a 33.5% pricing premium over the DNC. On the flip side, in terms of year-over-year growth, we see a 62% growth for Chicago relative to a 55.6% growth in the RNC in Milwaukee. Milwaukee and the RNC, higher rate. Chicago and the DNC, higher year-over-year growth. And I also have on the bottom of this slide, you can see an average of all the other U.S. destinations that Lighthouse tracks. And you can see during the same dates of the RNC, year-over-year, we're talking negative 0.8% growth. And for the DNC, positive 2.9% growth. So we could really see the impact that these conventions had on their markets. Now I want to look at the pricing evolution. So what we see here is a pricing curve, and this is the 350-day mark, meaning 350 days of lead time ahead of each day of the convention. And over the time series, we could see how the price evolves in terms of bookable rates online. Again, we could see how the price evolves over the course of the lead time leading up to the event, as well as this is day zero. So this is if you're booking on the day of your travel. And what's fascinating here is that if you booked 350 days out versus the day of, you're almost spending the exact same price. So we see it kind of peaked and then kind of declined and leveled out back to where it started. Interesting. Why is that? More on that later. I have some theories. On the flip side, this is the Republican National Convention's booking pricing curve. And what we see here, this is much more typical, but not universal, but typical of a major market event where you see ultimately appreciation as the event nears. We see pricing growing up and going up and going up. Obviously, little ups and downs. We're looking at trends, the long trends. We're not necessarily looking at little ups and downs, but we see it started over here, it went up a little bit, then came down, and then just kind of general healthy appreciation until it hit that max, okay? Now, like I said, this is more typical, but not universal. If you guys tuned in last month to our event where we dove into the Paris Olympic data, we remember that the Paris pricing data started up here and then just came down the whole time, more or less over the course of the pricing curve. So it was much more akin to what we saw in the Democratic convention, where it kind of just corrected downward for much of the pricing lead up. So again, we'll get to why I think this is a little bit later, but right now I want to switch gears to some short-term rental data, okay? Because that is very much important in our analysis. So what we see here, this is the Chicago short-term rental supply, okay? On the top, the orange line, what we have here, this is the total units in Chicago in short-term rentals, okay? Bottom line is an aggregate of studios and one-bedroom units. So the bottom line is going to be your supply of your units that are most comparable to your traditional hotel room. So for Chicago, you could see that for a while, it was considerably more than half the supply. You could see over here, 4,500 to about, 8,100 total. So you can see it was more than half. And then now it's close to half, but just under. So you can see as of the most recent data, as of August 1, we're talking about 5,000 of units of studio and one bedroom to 11,000 total. Switching gears to Milwaukee, somewhat similar to the hotel market. This is a much smaller market. And you can see here that for a while, this is the studio and one bedroom. It's very stable. It's gradually increasing, but you could see that the explosion, I would say, of short-term rental units overall is much greater than the growth of the studio and one-bedroom units. So you can see the multi-occupancy units are accelerating much more rapidly, okay? So what I want to do now is switch back to this, and what we're going to see here is this is a breakdown by bedroom count. So we can see the total units over here on the top, as well as the studio and one bedroom, again, comparable to hotels, as well as the 2-bedroom units, 3 to 4 bedroom, as well as this 5-bedroom kind of large unit supply as well. Okay. Now, let's talk about pricing. Now, I just want to point out that our pricing data does not include, for short-term rentals, it does not currently include platform fees or cleaning fees. This is, if you were to log on to one of the websites, this is going to be your base price before the kind of the incremental fees. But nonetheless, this should give you a good benchmark. And you can see the aggregate ADR. Again, this is an aggregate of all 4 days. The aggregate ADR for the Republican National Convention, 623. And again, this is ADR. Hotel data was pricing data. So aggregate 623. And you can see the breakdown of studios, 2 bedrooms, 3, 4, and 5 plus coming in close to $2,000 per night. And you can see very, very healthy year over year growth. I mean, in the 200 to 300+% year over year growth. So very, very significant growth as it relates to the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Democratic National Convention, aggregate 261 on the ADR side. And again, you can see the breakdown of studio and 1-bedroom units to all the way to that 5 plus. This is healthy year over year appreciation, 40 to 55%, significant. Obviously, not nearly as significant as the growth in Milwaukee. And again, more on why I think that was shortly. But nonetheless, this is still very marked growth that we're seeing here. And here are some key short-term rental statistics. So again, all aggregated. This is the short-term rental occupancy for both the Milwaukee RNC and the Chicago DNC. 68% for Milwaukee, 62% for Chicago. One interesting thing to point out here, that, like I mentioned, this is the aggregate of all 4 nights, but I looked at the breakdown of occupancies for each night. And in both instances, that last night of the convention, the Thursday night of each respective convention, that is the night when the President Trump and Kamala Harris both accepted the nomination and spoke and addressed the crowd. The Thursday night occupancy for the Republican National Convention was actually the second lowest of the 4 nights, whereas for the DNC, the Thursday night was actually the highest occupancy of the 4 nights. So highest occupancy for the DNC, second lowest occupancy for the RNC on that 4th night. But the short-term rental occupancy was actually greater in Milwaukee on that 4th night than the DNC on the 4th night. So kind of both sides of the equation right there. But that is how the occupancy looked like. I also want to talk about this price per bedroom statistic. What does this mean? So what I did here was this is not weighted, and this is not an ADR figure. This is not weighted by the number of room nights sold. This is, I took the ADR for each of the room sizes, and I divided that by the number of rooms in the unit. So if we're talking about a 10-bedroom unit, that was $2,000. That would be $200 per bedroom. 5-bedroom unit for $500. $100 per bedroom, okay? So I wanted to understand what the per bedroom cost was on average. I averaged all those together. And a single bedroom in a short-term rental unit, $344 in Milwaukee, $172 in Chicago. So what's interesting is that the RNC for short-term rentals, from an ADR perspective, they were able to achieve a per bedroom price, base price, I should say, again, not including fees, but a per bedroom base price fairly similar to the pricing data we showed for hotels. That was $361, and we're looking at a $344 price per bedroom for short-term rentals. similar. For Chicago, they were not able to achieve this kind of balance between the per bedroom price as well as the hotel price. And now onto a slide I like to call fun aggregations, because this is hotel data. We got to find some fun here. So fun aggregations like who prefers to have a bit more personal space when traveling? That would be the Democrats. 49% of the short-term rentals that were booked were studio or one bedroom. Okay? Who prefers short-term rentals to come with a roommate? That would be the Republicans. About a third of the rooms booked in short-term rentals, again, were two-bedroom units. Lastly, who prefers to throw a slumber party when traveling? That marginally was the Republicans as well. They slight lead in terms of the percentage of room nights booked that were 5+ bedrooms. Slight lead, but a lead. Okay. So, and just I got to show you something else. This is cool. I'm going to show you something very cool. This is a true data geek cool thing to show you. Okay. Check this out. So we have the percentage of booked room nights right here. Okay. By type of unit. Okay. So we're going to put these to the side. Okay. The different percentages I just walked you through. You ready for something cool? Check this out. This is the supply breakdown. This is the percentage of units across each individual bucket. So the percentage of one bedrooms, this percentage of two bedrooms. And we could see that the percentage of booked nights compared to the percentage of the supply, they're almost identical. They're not fully identical, but they're really close. Like the supply, there's 46% of the units there were studio and one bedroom, and 49% were booked in terms of the number of booked rooms. That's remarkable. It didn't have to be this way. To be clear, no one room type exceeded 73% occupancy. No one size of unit exceeded 73%. So there was vacancy. People could have booked other size rooms, but the natural distribution of how people booked was very, very similar to the supply. So I thought that was extremely cool. Okay, so now we know the scoop and where pricing fell, and we see how Milwaukee outperformed Chicago in terms of pricing fairly markedly. Why? Here's my theory. Now, we know that these are two vastly different markets in terms of sizing, right? And we also know that the published attendee levels for both events fairly similar, 50,000 in both cases. Okay, so let's look at the Democratic convention's price evolution. So we could see that it peaked right around here, around this 188-day mark. That was the peak of pricing, around 6 months ahead. 6 months ahead, pricing peaked. On the books occupancy in Chicago, as of this date, around 30% for the convention dates. So you're a revenue manager. And if you're a revenue manager, what do you do when 6 months out, a 50,000 person event is coming and you're only at 30% occupancy? You cut rate. And that's exactly what happened. You cut rate. On the flip side, conversely, now we can look at the RNC. Now, again, remember, same attendee count, roughly, roundly. But this is a city with 6,200 plus hotel rooms in the downtown area, 25,000 in the greater Milwaukee area. This is simple supply and demand. Rooms are much more finite, both in terms of hotel as well as short-term rental. So when you are in a situation like this, when you're assuming the same number of people are coming and one city has much more supply, I think this was just a situation of straight up supply and demand economics. Finite supply, prices will rise. That is what I think really happened in the case of these two conventions. So what it comes down to is this. Here's what I think is the most important takeaway of all of this. Make sure you vote. Because voting, honestly, is much more important than all of this. All this data, I have no idea what it means in the context of who's going to win the election. I don't. But I do know that votes mean everything in the context of an election. So make sure your voice is heard and vote. So anyway, guys, that is a wrap. Thank you guys so much for coming. This has been great. You guys have been great. And listen, I look forward to doing this again. We will be doing these regularly. These are our data stories. So please Come back in the future. Come say hello. See you next time, everybody.